Tonight we're talking about, do you know your rights? Now we're going to talk about that in the context of DUI checkpoints. With us tonight to discuss this, Lieutenant Joe Vettel. And I just want to be crystal clear. I'm not coming out here tonight trying to give you ammo when you end up at a DUI checkpoint, how to act towards a cop to, essentially get away with a DUI. That's not the context tonight. The context tonight for us is really looking at the Constitution for you to know what rights you have and what you don't have, so you can act appropriately if you find yourself in a DUI checkpoint. So to create that context, I want to start here with the Fourth Amendment, just so we know what we're all talking about. The Fourth Amendment states, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, in particular describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So with that context, I'm going to play a short clip here from this video that's been going crazy online, and you tell us, hey, this kid's got a legal leg to stand on, or he doesn't. Let's play the clip.
How you doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Go ahead and roll your window down for me.
This is fine, sir.
Do what?
This is fine.
That's fine.
Yes, sir.
Why is that fine?
Because I can hear you.
How old are you?
Is that a required question to answer?
Yes, sir, it is.
I'm 21.
Stay right there for me.
Yes, sir.
So his window is rolled down a little bit. Does that fit the context of his right to be able to do that with that cop?
Really, his obligation at that moment is one, to give him the required information under the law. And really under the law, he's required to give kind of the basic things that you would give at a traffic stop. And that would be the driver's license, the insurance, those types of things upon request.
Really?
And really, at that point, once you, again, most of the time, again, the only people that have really outlined that is within the state of North Dakota is the U.S. Supreme Court. The North Dakota Supreme Court has never weighed in under the issue of checkpoints, and so 11 states have. And again, when you get there, really what they're asking for is cooperation. And again, they do have the right to remain silent. And don't get me wrong, they do have the right to do that, and some choose to do that. They choose just to hand that information to them, engage the officer, but at that point, really, most of the time, it's just a civil conversation, trying to get, but again, from this point, from what you've shown so far, the young man has done nothing wrong.
So it's within his constitutional rights to say, hey, I've got my window rolled down?
Yep, he certainly has that right to do so.
And because he's stopped, and there's really no probable cause, because there's no show of him being intoxicated, does he still need to give up his driver's license?
If he's requested it, typically they won't ask for that. Typically what it is a situation where they're just trying to, again, as you know, look for some signs of intoxication. And really what it is they're trying to minimize the intrusion upon the driver. And that's really what the U.S. Supreme Court has said. This is only constitutional if they do everything they can to minimize the exposure and really the time that person is being held. And I think we've, again, different areas do it differently, but I think what really the premise of what they were asking for is, one, you need to be able to take and articulate as a group why you're doing this. You can't just willy-nilly do a checkpoint. You need to articulate why are we doing this, and really from there they've outlined some very specific guidelines on what they're trying to follow.
A couple of things I want to get to. One of them is this, because at one point in this video, the cop becomes, kind of overbearing. Hey, how old are you? Kind of playing the tough guy act, if you will, which I think a lot of people, myself included, would get intimidated. Guy with a badge on, he's got a baton, a gun. I'm probably going to feel like, hey, whatever you need. But still, do I have a right, even though this guy is trying to intimidate me, say, hey, my window's rolled down, I've stopped. And there's a point where he says, am I being detained? The cop will not answer that question. So, again, am I legally okay by just sitting in my car? And
again, you get into that gray area where can they articulate that you're preventing them from doing their job? And some would say no, some would say yes. And really what it comes down to is, again, you eventually, I'm sure the North Dakota State Supreme Court will weigh in on the issue. Again, why they have the guidelines in place certainly are outlined. What they can't do and what the driver couldn't do is, like, all of a sudden he says, I'm just going to ignore the stop signs, I'm going to ignore the officer, and I'm going to drive right through it. Certainly that would, one, cause for a safety concern, but two, he can't do that. He needs to follow those rules of the road. But once he gets there, again, really all they can do, the officer has to be able to articulate through that process why he believes that he's under the influence, then he can engage him further. But once he has a few moments to do that, he's unable to do it, that officer should be saying, okay, have a nice day and move on.
So this officer kind of pushed the line again, and I want to get to something this gentleman brought up here in the article I saw about this, where because this person wasn't necessarily cooperating in the cop's mind, then he brought out the canine. So the canine guy starts walking around the car. There's no drugs in the car like that, but the canine person said, the handler says, check here. And what this gentleman's saying is that that's sort of code between him and the dog for the dog to pot. Now it creates a scenario that's a false positive for this cop to do a quote-unquote unreasonable search and seizure. I guess I'm asking you to sort of toe in the line here. Does it happen? Do canine handlers sometimes use false positives to dig in, or maybe they legally can't?
You know, and I can't speak for all canines. I know our canines do a fantastic job, and they're extremely careful about what they do, because they know their reputation's on the line. And so they are extremely careful about, in fact, there's many times where they go on the other side and say, you know what, we're not positive, so we're not going to utilize that as a test. So I think we certainly try to do everything we can to prevent any of that from happening. I think things we can clearly see from the video. One, the young man had a point to make, and he made it very clearly. And I think clearly, I think we can agree the officer got upset, and he bit on exactly what that young man was trying to get him to do. And I think that is something that we all need to recognize, that, again, this was not handled perfectly. I'm not there to second-guess the officer. I'm not there to second-guess the young man. But I think we all can agree on those two issues. They both were trying to prove a point, and I think they both ended up probably proving each other's point.
And again, I want to give you 30 seconds to wrap it up, but I do want to be clear. Look, this is not trying to give you tricks or anything like that. And this young man came out and said, look, I'm not trying to do anything against cops. I've got a lot of respect for them, and I just wanted to show my constitutional rights and where they can get blurred. I got 30 seconds. Anything else you want to add?
I think the biggest issue is we just want to say that, again, this is just one tool in our toolbox. We use it as sparingly as possible. We understand it's not popular, but again, it's just one of those things that we feel has done a marvelous job in really addressing an issue that's pretty major within
You know
our
what blows
community.
me away is you guys promote the heck out of these checkpoints, and you still get guys with DUIs at them. It's just...
Yeah, and again, that's one of those issues that really, sometimes it's almost a standing joke for us, because we really anticipate that these things are going to, once we put them out on radio, on TV, that we're going to be standing there out in the streets and nobody's going to drive by. But that never seems to happen, and again, we always have a few customers. But I got to say that we certainly have gotten, I think, better in our community, and people recognize it as being more of an issue.
Lieutenant Vettel, always great to have you here. Really appreciate it. Be sure and stay with us, and as always, let us know what you feel when you see this video and what you've seen so far from Lieutenant Vettel. Was this young man within his constitutional rights or not? As always, you can go to our website, let us know your thoughts, and stay with us. I'm going to share with you something as you look at this cop with the intimidation aspect. If you've ever heard of the Stanford prison experiment, or if you haven't, you got to check this out and watch how susceptible we are to certain areas in our lives. Stay close, much more.